Also, I'd like to mention that our keynote speaker, Dr. Gary Brogan-Dewey, is here today, and his talk is sponsored by USDA, ASPCA, Boehringer Ingelheim, and ABMA. So again, you'll hear us give a shout out to our sponsors for specific sessions and throughout the week here. USDA is one of our premier sponsors, and Dr. Ann McCann is here from USDA Animal Care. So I'd like to invite Ann up to the stage to say a few words prior to the keynote presentation. Thanks for being here, Ann.
Well, welcome everybody. You know, I think 2008 was the first NASAAEP Summit, first one, and we've been doing them almost annually ever since. And this has been so tremendous to bring everybody together for this exchange of ideas and an opportunity to really look at how we make this whole field better nationally. So I would like to take this opportunity. I know we have our regional emergency coordinators in the audience. If any of you are here, please stand up. There they are. I hope you will take the opportunity. USDA Animal Care has appointed our regional emergency coordinators to each of the FEMA regions. So find your regional emergency coordinator and say hello. So that they know who you are and you know who they are. Also, our ESF 11 colleagues are here. We have a lot of things going on in transition right now at USDA, and ESF 11 is actually transitioning out of the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service and down to our department level Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Coordination. We expect that this transition will be seamless to everybody, really in just a paperwork transaction to realign them down at the department level. But we think that that's going to give us the opportunity to really leverage more of USDA's capabilities and bring them into the ESF 11 fold. So we're very thankful that this change is happening. They happen to be meeting this morning. They met all day yesterday and this morning with the leadership from the Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Coordination. So they will be with us for the rest of the week, beginning after lunch this afternoon. So please take a minute to say hi to your ESF 11 coordinator as well. Is Dennis Kohler here? Okay, there's Dennis. He's with our Wildlife Services program in APHIS, and Barb Porter-Spalding from Veterinary Services will also be here as well. So that kind of rounds out the crew. We have Dr. Kevin Dennison and myself as well for animal care. USDA has really enjoyed the opportunity to partner with NASAAEP and make sure that many of you as state travelers can come to the summit, because we think that this provides a critical venue to bring everybody together, states, federal, local. How many of you are from states? Excellent. Do you guys know how many states are present?
42.
42 states are present at this summit. That's just amazing, huh? Yeah. And this year, you know, one of the things that we at the national level have really been focused on is, you know, all incidents, we hear it all the time, all incidents begin and end locally. And it's so critically important to give our local folks the opportunity to interface with all of us and build these critical relationships that we've been building for years. So all of you who are here from a local jurisdiction, I know we've really done outreach to get people here this year. Could you raise your hands? Look at that. Look at that. And as NASAAEP grows into the future, I hope to see many, many more local folks coming with their state counterparts to really make the best of this summit and all of the other things that we try to do to really bring all of us together. So, you know, USDA is proud to be here and sponsoring much of the state travel for this summit. We hope that to see these summits continue well into the future. And I just want to echo what everybody else has said and welcome you to Washington. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. McCann. We appreciate your sponsorship and support, and the fact that USDA is so well represented here, and we can all interact with you this week. So it's time for a very important event this morning to introduce our keynote speaker, the event of the morning, and we're so pleased to have Dr. Gary Rogan-Dewey here with us today. Dr. Rogan-Dewey is the One Health Program Director at Lincoln Memorial University College of Veterinary Medicine. Among many One Health accomplishments, Dr. Rogan-Dewey has chaired the World Organization of Animal Health Group on Disaster Management and Risk Reduction. He's also a former chair of the International Affairs Committee of the American Association of Veterinary Medical Colleges, also a former member of the White House Security Council for Food and Agriculture Working Group. He's a former Department of Defense liaison to Department of Homeland Security, USDA, and FDA, and has also held senior positions in the U.S. Army Veterinary Corps. So please help me welcome Dr. Gary Rogan-Dewey this morning.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. It's a little humbling to talk in front of this group, but I'm honored to be here and hope I can contribute. I was, I think, at the first NASAAEP meeting as a speaker, and then this is the second NASAAEP meeting I've been at. In the meantime, I haven't left the disaster arena. I've been spending most of my time on the international side and really taking what you have done here and translating into what other countries who have not as robust and developed as you are, is where you are in the disaster arena. So with that, I'd like to get started, and what we're going to do is talk about a future vision. And they just sent me an email and said, you have 10 minutes to come up with a title to your talk. I don't know, but how about we talk about the future? And then after I look at it, that's pretty presumptuous. But let's go through it and take a look. As we take it, these are things you have dealt with and will deal with into the future. Across the vast array of animal and agriculture activities. And these aren't going away. All we have to do is look at today's Wall Street Journal on the front page, volcano in New Zealand, killed people. All these things have impacts on our societies, our economies, on our people, and on our animals. Neil Bohr said, prediction is hard, especially if it's about the future. And so what we have here is not a future that we know will happen. This is a future that we're hoping for. This is like the ghost of Christmas future. So this will tell us what we do. And so I didn't want to come here at Christmas during the holidays without a holiday presents for us. And so as we take a look at the talk, I want to start off with some holiday gifts. And like your own holiday gifts, some of them you already know what's in there, because I looked at the agenda and some of my wish list is already here. You're going to see it this week. It's pretty exciting. But the first thing that I have, the first present that we'll open up here is the easy button. and this is what we all wish we had. But we all know that that's not possible. We don't have an easy button. And that's why we're here, because we do hard work. Everything that we do together contributes hard work. So what's the first present that I want to have? Well, the first present I want to have is this, right here. I'm not quite sure what it is. I found it in a thrift shop. It's a stuffed bear with pineapple kind of claw wearing Elton John's glasses. So why is it that we would want this? Well, it took somebody's crazy imagination to do this. And one of the first gifts that I want to open up is imagination. I want to be able to imagine what could happen. I don't want us to be able to imagine how we would respond. And imagination is key. If we take a look, it'll move forward. So if we look at Einstein, he talked about imagination is more important than knowledge. And when I first saw this, it looked like a bumper sticker or a Hallmark card. And it's like, heck, I was at school a long time to get knowledge, a long, long time. And it took them a lot of hard work to give me any knowledge and me to accept it. And it's like, so why couldn't they have just given me my kindergarten imagination? That would have been a lot easier than all the knowledge. But then I saw what the rest of the quote is, because knowledge has limits, but imagination has no boundaries. And so as we take a look at what we do going in the future, we need to imagine. How many people have heard this in the event or beside an event? Let me see some hands. I know people have said, yeah, a lot. We never imagined that the fire would be that big. We never imagined that the levees in New Orleans would fail. We never imagined Hurricane Harvey would stay planted over Houston for 10 days. We never imagined that people with box cutters would get on planes and attack our nation. We have to be able to imagine those things. And so imagination is important. And as this article talked about, we have a natural aversion to imagining bad things. So I'm from Lincoln Memorial University, College of Veterinary Medicine. We have 2 campuses, one in Tennessee and about 10 miles away in Virginia, right at the foot of the Appalachian Mountains, adjoining the Cumberland Gap National Park, and we have a training center there. And this year, I taught a course on disaster medicine as an elective for our students. And I had them do a hazard analysis and risk analysis, looking at hazards, likelihoods, and impacts. And you all have done these. And so as they did this, and I asked students, so what are the hazards you're most concerned about? Well, we were doing an exercise on fire, so they said fire. They got that. So fire actually would be one. But for students, then their next biggest hazard they envisioned was an animal infection within the facility. Cats with feline distemper, dogs with parvo. That's the worst that they can imagine. And they said, well, Dr. V, what are you concerned about? What's your hazard? I went to Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University as a grad student, and I taught at Virginia Tech at the Virginia Maryland Regional College of Veterinary Medicine. And while I wasn't there during the shooting event, the legacy of that shooting event sticks in our minds. And I told them my biggest concern here, because of the impact on people, would be an active shooter event. That did not occur to them, which is okay. They're looking at it through their eyes, but that had not occurred to them. And I had a student raise his hand and say, Dr. V, do you always think about the worst case scenario? And I say, I hope so, because that's our job. That's our job to look at what could be the worst thing that would happen. And by planning for the worst and preparing for the worst, we can prepare for those things that happen ordinarily easy. The easy button comes out. If you can handle the worst stuff, the easy button is there for the rest. So what's the worst case scenario? So if we look at Japan, earthquake, tsunami, Fukushima, built right on the ocean, and the impact that it has on agriculture. And if we look at this, how did this happen? Well, you could say the earthquake happened, and then the tsunami overran, the power went off, and the emergency power was overrun by the tsunami. But it wasn't a failure of planning. They had all kinds of planning. It was a failure of imagination. It was a failure of imagination. How bad could this be? You can't mitigate, and you can't prevent what you cannot imagine. So as you're thinking through your programs and your activities and things you do, think about those things that you could imagine and what you would do to prevent them, to mitigate them. Bill Gates talked about the possibility of 30 million people dying from a new disease. If we think of that from our organizations and our capabilities and our animals and our agriculture, our industry, what impact would that have? When we have failures, it's often been a failure of imagination. It's been a failure to imagine what could be the worst and how we would deal with this. And if you want a good scary read, this is a novel, 1 Second After. 1 Second After talks about the impacts of an electromagnetic pulse. This would be like a nuclear weapon that is detonated high in the atmosphere and causes a cascade of electrons that wipes out every piece of electricity, everything that runs on electric, every iPhone, every plane, every car, everything that's electrically driven is gone. And what happens with society economies, it includes what happens with animals. And it's pretty sobering. This comes pretty close to the worst case scenario. So we don't have to look at and imagine everything. Other people are imagining them for us. If we take a look at global risk, this is the World Economic Forum. And they're taking a look at this through money eyes. It's not a political agenda, it's not a scientific agenda, it's economically, what are the things that we could be faced with? And if we take a look at this list, all of these involve animals, all of these involve people, and whether we're looking at water shortages, whether we're looking at food crisis, whether we're looking at social instability, all of these impact what we do. So we don't have to have the imagination for everything. Water shortages. Anyone who's lived in Texas knows in the last few years the droughts that we've had. South Africa this year in Cape Town came within days of running out of water. These are real things that we have to pay attention to. We also, and we're going to hear, I think, from Dr. Green, we need to have an understanding of climate change. We have to understand the potential the changes that could occur and what we could do as they arise. And we have to really have a good understanding of this. This doesn't come from a crazy tree-hugging site. This is CDC. These are things from our own government saying we have to pay attention to it. So we saw a picture of Mount Rainier in its beauty, and then the planners have shown us, so here's what's going to happen. You can see the lava flows in green, the flooding, you can see the lahars. This is the mud and ice and melted water that moves on down in giant flooding, and then flooding into Seattle, and all the things that could happen there. And this is part of the planning. But, and we may hear from our Washington folks, we already have seen, this isn't something that could possibly happen. This is something that has happened here. This is Mount St. Helens. And after Mount St. Helens, we had ash that went all across the west into the eastern part of the state, 4 to 5 inches. If we have Mount Rainier go, and we have ash that covers our wheat fields, our cattle, our dairies, our animals, how are we going to deal with those? What do we have to work with? So we have to look at our imagination to be able to picture what could happen, and then how do we prepare for that? Now, we're looking at imagination not only from disasters. That's pretty sobering. Boy, everyone talking before was laughing. We're not hard to laugh about all these bad things. So we want to take a look at also solutions. So here's a question: how we use our imagination here. If we have this little cork coaster here, and you have a piece of paper with that hole in it, you can clearly see the diameter of the coaster is greater than the size across that piece of paper. Now, if I gave you a question, use your imagination, how could we get the coaster through the piece of paper? And you could, oh yeah, we'll just crumble it up and push it on through there. I'll just rip the piece of paper larger. How do we get the coaster to go through the piece of paper when the piece of paper is smaller than that? How do we keep it intact? So I'm going to take this piece of paper, and beautiful holiday apparel here, and now we have the coaster, and you can see it completely covers the hole, both forward and back. The hole's not bigger on the other side. So Can we do this? Is this possible? Well, since I've already said we're going to use our imagination, we're saying this is possible. Well, what if I fold a piece of paper like this, and then take the coaster and just push it on through? Push it on through my hole, just like that. The coaster didn't change, the paper didn't change, our approach changed. It was just taking a different approach, using our imagination to do that. If you want to see how that works later, I'll show you. But it's a good way to get a free drink at a bar. So, the next, our next present coming out of the great present box is this. What? It's a pencil. Pretty simple. That's because a lot of our solutions that we have are going to be low-tech solutions. If we take a look, now I thought I was going to do a gotcha on one of the Washington counties. And I'm not sure, Click-a-tap, is that right? Say it.
Click-a-tap.
Click-a-tap, Click-a-tap County. So I was going to look at Click-a-tap County. It has a population about 28,000. Anyone here from Click-a-tap? No, close to Click-a-tap? Yeah. So I thought I was going to do a gotcha to just show you how unprepared counties were. So I took a look at Click-a-tap, their animal disaster annex plan. When I saw it, it was pretty well filled out. And in fact, their county plan had 918 pages for a 2,000-person county, and they had done a lot of work to put this plan together. In fact, I pulled this plan now to use it as an example for teaching, because the animal annex is pretty extraordinary. Well, why did I think I was going to catch them? Well, now I'm going to go back east to a rural county in an unnamed state. And I looked at their animal annex that we used as an example for teaching our students, and here's what it looked like. So this is why I want low-tech solutions. Take the pencil, fill it out. Take the pencil, fill it out, and actually do it with the people that are actually going to have to execute it, because a piece of paper that you develop by yourself is not going to be of much value. And where's Jimmy Tickle? I saw Jimmy here somewhere. He's way hiding in the back. Last year, I think on this about exact date, we were in Italy, and we were working with veterinary services from the Balkans and trying to get them to develop a contingency plan. And they wanted us to write it for them. And they said, we can give you a contingency plan. It's not the plan that's of value, it's creating the plan. It's creating the networks, understanding it. And so the same thing here. Don't just fill it out. Sit there and find the stakeholders, find the people, and put the plan together. Now this is notional. You can't see it. I might get in trouble if you did. But I've listed some, I've just pulled off some counties in Washington, and I've evaluated their animal annex plans. And actually, I didn't evaluate it all. I just put some colored numbers up there. So those that are red, those that are blank, those are green, that are yellow. I want to know what the status is of every city and every county plan is in Washington, in every one of your 42 states, and in fact, all the states. What's the status of the plan? We can evaluate it. Well, who has time for that? Well, you know who has time for it? We can crowdsource that. We have master's students. We have students that are working on MPHs who are interested in the disaster and emergency medicine. Let them go through, give them a template, let them evaluate the plan, and then we can see where we are and know who needs help. Who can we help get to better, and make their county plan, their city plan, it's one that's functional and actively working. I love this. NASAAEP, the Best Practices Working Group. I'd love to see who has worked on one of the Best Practices Working Groups here. Lots of hands. I see lots. This is impressive. I'm extraordinarily impressed on what you've done to be able to bring best practices so we can see them, you've looked at them, you've done the analysis, and go forward. But in looking at that, I can't be calm, because we want more. There are more best practices out there, and encourage you to keep moving forward and looking at different venues and places where we can look at best practices. The U.S. Army at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, has a Combined Arms Center, and part of the Combined Arms Center has a Center for Army Lessons Learned. Sometimes they're just Army lessons observed, but they're lessons learned. And if I put in disaster, I pull these out, and you can see that there's a staff officer's manual for disasters. And then it says underneath the comment, they didn't really know too much about what the civilians did. We take a look here that we have a lessons learned about doing foreign animal disasters, and here we see one of using gaming to teach how to do foreign animal assistance, or not animal assistance, foreign disaster assistance. And so we have the ability to do this. So NASAAEP, it's easy for me to say and task you to do something. So NASAAEP, let's get the NASAAEP Center for Disaster Lessons Learned. To begin with, all they have to do is just be put there. I saw in our meeting that there are going to be lots of lessons learned. But if these are the only people that hear them in this meeting, they die. If it gets put into the same place where the Ark of the Covenant and Raiders Lost Ark was, it doesn't do any good. So let's collect them. We can analyze them later. We can get the best practices groups to take a look and analyze them later. But let's collect them so people can see what the best practices are. We have a whole group from a whole disaster season, and we have those from the campfire. We're going to hear some of that, I believe, this week. But let's not let them die here. Let's just put them on a place, put them out for the public, and let people be able to see. And then we get that same crowdsourcing, all those master's students, Eagle Scout projects, and start doing the analysis later. Gaming, we saw that on Army Lessons Learned, and I think Jimmy and his colleague are going to show us. In fact, I saw some gaming. I want to see more gaming and simulation out there, how we can engage the public, how we can engage young people in terms of disasters, and how we can use that to prepare for what we do in the future. We need cultural competence. Why do we need cultural competence? We need cultural competence because we're working in a vast array of communities, areas where we need to understand the local conditions. We all know disasters start locally, they end locally. We have to understand what is local there. Here's one zip code in Seattle that at their home they speak 66 languages. What does that do to your risk communications? What does that do as you're starting to deal with these communities? So we need to develop cultural competence, and I'd like to see that embedded into our future. I want to see more economic data. All of those, we saw lots of hands working with government, numbers of animals served, number of people trained, we counted this, we counted that, and that's just counting. What does Congress care about? Votes and money. Can you show the return on investment? And here we have an example of a benefit cost ratio of 96 to 1. That's real. If you can take and translate what you do into either saving money or preventing loss, that's a powerful tool. We need more cost-benefit accounting here. And we can never have enough education. Not for some of our vet schools, not for some of our agriculture schools, but for all of them. We need more training, not just for the very best prepared states, for all the states, and we need to exercise this. Those, let's say it again, click a tap, click a tap, click a tap. So click a tap counting, that beautiful plan, does it work? I don't know. If the exercising of it works as well as the plan, it's going to be extraordinary. If it's just a piece of paper, then it's worthless. So exercising and looking at what we can do in the future to validate where we are. This is just one that popped in my head, but we have lots of resources to put people on the ground for field units, but we don't have the people trained to go and work in an EOC that's going to maybe operate 24/7 for 4 months. And we need trained planners, not just rescuers, not just shelters. Not all the things we do on the ground. We need people that can go into a headquarters level, at the national level, at the state level, and give you relief. Because I think 24 hours a day for 4 months, going to be tough. So we need to develop teams that have the ability to do that. And we need research. We need more research into what we see here in climate change. We see this investment in sheltering practices. We need more research in behavioral health. When I lived in San Antonio, fortunately in Houston, my wife and I went to the movie and Hidalgo, and they said, "Great, how many people have seen it?" This is like, to me, this is like, if you want to get inspired more than Rocky, go see Hidalgo. True story of Western cowboy going and racing his paint horse against the Arab horses, and I won't tell you how it ends, but it's good. And and when we came back from the movie, I'd left a gallon of milk out on the counter. So I picked it up, and I put it back in the refrigerator. My wife said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm putting the milk in the refrigerator." She said, "It's bad." I was like, "No, it's not. I sniffed it." You know. I said, "It's good." She said, "Well, how do you know?" I'm a veterinarian. I have advanced training in microbiology. I'm board certified in preventive medicine. I'm responsible for all the food safety, policy, and oversight for the entire Department of Defense, and I work in the White House on these things. And she looked at me and gave me that kind of, it's not exactly a smile, it's kind of like, you know. And so the milk's in the refrigerator. Of course, I have important things to do, so I'm back in my office and my keyboard. Kind of like people at the airport who won't look at you. And I hear something in the kitchen. And I go back in, and there's my wife. Down the sink. Well, what's the problem? Did she do the right thing? Yes. Yeah, I did. I did a lot of yeses. She did the right thing. If in doubt, throw it out. Not the husband, the milk. And so she did the right thing. She did the right thing on getting rid of it. How there's our food safety? Was the milk okay? How many people think it was bad? Usually I get a lot of people raise their hand, they're bad, but they're not science people or they're brave. And the milk would be okay. Its shelf life would be diminished, but we weren't all going to die from milk, probably. And but what's the problem? Well, the problem is I had the credentials. I didn't have the credibility. So I see in our program you're going to talk about credentialing, and so as we take a look at credentials, understand that behind the credentials, you have to have credibility. Do we as a nation have credibility on our disasters? Well, more than half Americans feel like we're inadequately prepared to respond to a disaster. So somewhere out there, we need to work with our communities, our part, that we build not only their credentials, but we build our credibility and make sure that they are engaged in the process and know where we go forward. As we go down the line and take a look at things, there's some difference. We've talked about the low-tech pieces. We saw the pencil, and now we're going to look at some other things that might be possible. And if we take a look at this, besides the low-tech activities that we have, so what else is out there? Well, what we'd like to do is see. Well, remember that worst-case scenario? Don't let this thing hit you. Okay, go down. That's a lot of work for like 7 seconds. So there's a lot of work we have to do on the low-tech side, and it's going to be very fruitful, and it's not better than something else, but we're a little fascinated with high-tech. So let's get high-tech, and I'm really glad it didn't go on hit him. That was bad news. So as we take a look at high-tech, there's some things we need to be able to do. We need agility, we need to be analytical, we need to be able to anticipate. We need to have the sensing with surveillance, social reporting, social media screening, satellite imagery, drones, all of these things that we need to add to our toolbox of responding to disasters. I want the high-tech drones. I want the robots out there. And then, but not just one at a time, I want them linked together so we get all the information from all of them to be able to know what's going on. How many people have a video doorbell, a Nest doorbell? So several. So I was with my son. We don't even have a doorbell. We're like low tech. Who is it? So I'm with my son about a week ago, and he was down in Florida, lives in Richmond, Virginia, and his phone buzzes, and there's someone at his door. It's the kids feeding his dog. So he knew that, and then the kids were doing, hey, do a little Thanksgiving dance or something. He knew what's going. How about we link all those and know what's going on in front of everybody's front door and seeing, where's the floodwater, where are the trees down, what's going on. We need to be able to capture what we have and the power we have right now to be able to access it. High-tech satellite imagery, certainly we have that now through weather, but there's other things we can do with it besides just tracking storm. We can use satellite imagery to look at the status of crops, the status of global warming, the status of drought, all these types of things. It's important to me. So I started my disaster career in 1991, decidedly low tech. I was moving sandbags for the Missouri floods. And I've been both a on-the-ground provider as well as a victim. So you can see Hurricane Andrew coming into Homestead on the east side of Florida, and I live on Sanibel Island at 3 feet of elevation on the left side. Not good for mitigation, but a good place for fishing. So, so this kind of satellite imagery gave me the information to get the heck out of there. But why is it that we still have people stay behind and want to evacuate? Well, part of the reason. Part of it because they don't have the imagination. Part of it is no one's there to take care of their animals, or they don't know who could take care of their animals. I want to be able to collect this big data and put it into a knowledge management system so we can understand better where we are and what's going on at any point in time. We want to take volunteers. We don't have to do it all ourselves. We can crowdsource. And here's an example of volunteers creating hazard maps by GIS by linking up at various levels to the point that they really can understand and give a sense about where the risks are, what the hazards are, what we're dealing with on the ground. I want to have situational awareness. Now, this is not from a disaster side. This is from the public health side. But on the disaster side, I want to know the status of every shelter. I want to know the location of every one of my responders. I want to have a situational map that tells me exactly what's going on and what the status is of each one. I want to be able to use voice interface. And honest to goodness, I can't tell you if this is going to work. So I'll give it a try. I built, much to the astonishment of my young faculty, I built a Alexa skill. And one of my young, you did what? I built Alexa skill. How did you do that? Well, I just looked at it and built it. So what I wanted to ask Alexa to tell me was, where's the closest disaster shelter? I wasn't allowed to do that because the word disaster is very protected. They don't just give it to amateurs. So I was asking, where's the closest disaster shelter? And let's see if Alexa can answer. So give this a try. It could be a success or utter failure. We'll see. Alexa, does this shelter allow pets?
shelter does not allow pets. The closest shelter that allows pets is Bellevue High School.
All right.
Wow. That's very nice.
So the next question was, Alexa, are there special requirements for cats at this shelter? And Alexa gets a little confused because there's a lot of stuff on cats, so we'll see what happens. Alexa, are there special requirements for cats at this shelter?
Here's something I found on the web. According to sunsentinel.com, cats must be brought to the shelter in carriers and dogs must be in a non-retractable leash.
Now, that's Alexa actually getting confused because Alexa was supposed to say the Bellevue High School shelter recommends you bring a cat carrier, food, medications, and vaccination records. But you've asked Alexa or Siri for something, and they've told you something completely different that you weren't looking for. But this is how people are interacting with the internet, not necessarily by voice. And so we need to get on the front end of this and create the scripts and create the information so they're not calling the state veterinarian for everything, that they can just ask Alexa, Alexa, what's Darlene's home phone number? And
Probably out there.
her grandmother's first name. So we need to be able to capture this as we go forward. We need to have a better understanding of social media. And early on in one of the national level exercises, a cohort of mine, Teresa Bernardo, gave a talk on social media and disasters. And one of the people in the audience said, Gary, you are ruining everything. You know, I mean, it just took us this long to get the ICS and everybody coordinated and doing the right thing. And if they'd had tomatoes, they would have thrown us at us. And it went from the first day of deep suspicion to second day of curiosity to third day of maybe we need to do this. Because whether you like it or not, no matter how perfect your communications and your planning, your organization, and your org charts and everything, this can overwhelm you. And so we need a better understanding of social media, how it networks people together, how we can leverage it. We can see here from some studies, not particularly surprising, but anticipatory of a disaster, you know, the low-grade social media, and then how in the core event, how it spikes. And those communications are going on regardless of what your own communications are delivering. And sometimes it's painfully slow. During the anthrax event in the United States, everything got pushed to the fact I could not say publicly the word anthrax. I couldn't talk to people what anthrax was because from the DoD standpoint, only one person could speak about anthrax, period, which meant it just ground to a halt. In the meantime, everybody's sending stuff at lower levels. So as you have your formal briefings and your formal things, understand that this cycle is moving much faster than you are. Here's an example of using enhanced social media and the fires this summer in Colorado and letting people know where resources were. There is a pet preparedness social media toolkit that's been developed, and so these are things we need to get our brains around, we need to get our arms around so we're prepared to go forward with. Social media, again, these spontaneously to show up as Facebook pages or others. Here's one where they're asking for help. Here's one where they're saying, here's where help is available. And we need to get our brains around this. We need to have collaborative work groups. I was involved with Haiti, and I never left the country. I was involved in Haiti, a part of a medical public health information sharing network. We just set the site up ourselves. There was no government funding or outside funding. And you can see where the red dots are. This group of people, we ended up with about 2,000 healthcare providers on the ground sending us information. And we got a report that said, I think I'm seeing a case of cholera. I can't tell you for sure because I don't have a way to diagnose it, but I've seen it before in Bangladesh. If it's not cholera, it's cholera-like. And because the reports we had about 3 days before it was officially notified that cholera, we had indications that cholera was going on. And what could we do? We pushed in oral rehydration solutions. We provided people mechanisms how they could make these themselves. They don't have to buy commercial ones. We set up demos on how you could just get PCV pipe and some glue and make a little IV stand. You don't have to wait for the stainless steel one to be shipped from the States. And so our collaborative efforts, our power all together, like Ann talked about, the power of all of us together far exceeds what one or two can do. And we have multiple collaborative groups that work on water, sanitation, that all sorts of things, medical care, that can be put together. We need to create our collaborative groups. Crisis mapping, and I'm not going to show the video because I think we have not so great internet here, and I don't want to waste some time. But look at crisis mapping. There's multiple types. Look at Google Crisis Mapping, and it'll give you a good idea of what we could do with maps to be able to have that visibility of what's going on. And then I want a time machine. Dang. Not a real time machine, but I want to take our imaginary time machine. And a lot of what we're going to hear about during this week starts with the event and how the response takes. And I want to get our imaginary time machine about what could be in the future and push this backwards. I want us to look at how we can push this back, and instead of how good we are for responding to disasters, how we mitigated them or prevented them altogether. That's the next thing I want, time machine. Sorry, don't have one. And my model for this, I think, is a great model because people, why bother with this? So for some of us who have gray hair, or have dyed our gray hair, I'm not pointing any fingers anywhere. But my remark, what? You're looking behind you. Some of us remember this, is that in the late 40s, early 50s, if the March of Dimes and science community had focused on response, today they would be publishing a report that says, we are so excited to announce we've just reached our 3 millionth iron lung. We have over 5 million people in wheelchairs, and we've provided over 12 million pairs of crutches. What a great job we have done. But instead, they came back and looked at the mitigation and prevention side.
I'm not quite sure what happened there. I wonder if we can. Let's see here. Sorry about this, but I'm going to have to, let's see if we can get you.
We can get there. Yeah, that's too scientific to go backwards. We're just moving on forward.
Something just spontaneous.
Yeah. The time machine, got it. You guys are quick. We're getting close. Here we are, time machine. And so instead of looking at the response, how many iron lungs can we make? Can we make a better iron lung? Can we have better crutches? Can we have better wheelchairs? No. How about we just get rid of the darn problem? How about we mitigate this? And so my brother, I was a little bit too young, my brother was a polio pioneer. And all the children are dutifully lined up and calmly taking their vaccinations. This was probably me. But polio is eliminated from the United States. We're on the verge of eliminating it from the world. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. I just put this slide in to kind of remind me of where we're spending a lot of time, and I have two. Working with OIE, they asked me to give a talk on animal health and welfare and natural disasters within the OIE framework. And we've spent a lot of time on this in animal welfare. What we haven't done is look at welfare of people as much. After the foot and mouth disease in the UK, there were 85 reported suicides. We had providers. You could see veterinarians and government employees were impacted. I did a survey in 2014 of Europe and Eastern Asian veterinary services, and 66 of them had no disaster guidelines. Not on behavioral health, they had no disaster guidelines at all. And so we worked with OIE to develop disaster guidelines. But if we look at two major guidelines that are published for animals, the LEGS, the Livestock Emergency Guidelines Standards, and also the FAO GEMP, the Good Emergency Management Practices. On the left-hand side on legs, there are 3 lines about responders. And there's 1 paragraph in the gap. And together these represent like 400 to 500 pages of material. We're not paying attention to it. Terry Whiting looked at perpetrator-induced trauma, that is when you cause it. Foot and mouth disease in Netherlands. 6 years after the event, 40% of veterinarians still had traumatic stress reactions. These are things we have to be aware of. Part of this is because of the changing roles. As veterinarians and animal caretakers, we're used to having the happy, we rescue the cat, we get it in a shelter, we return it back to owners, and everybody's happy. But the other part of it is that we destroy animals, healthy animals, in order to control a livestock disease outbreak. And so how is it that we can balance these two? We know that there's social and cultural impacts of disasters and the emotional impacts that are involved. This is not new news. Australia had a Johne's disease control program that went from 1995 to 1999, and they had to stop the program because the impact on the people that were doing the program was so devastating. We have information, again, the 9/11 terrorist attack, those working in DC, those that were working on the pile in New York, had behavioral health issues following that. In this more recent, in Japan, 2010, again, veterinarians that had PTSD that were associated with foot and mouth disease control. And notice you had veterinarians and livestock technicians, but you had clerical people that also had those. Don't assume that just because they're in an office or an operating center, or maybe just filling out paperwork somewhere, that they aren't impacted. So we have to protect the responders. We have through the FADPRAP and NAHAMS, we have some very, very good guidelines. These are very good guidelines to work with. But when I did a survey, and thank you for NASAAEP for helping distribute the survey for people and any of those who took it, 40% of the responders were aware that guidelines were there. Only a quarter of the people have had any advanced training. 84% reported there was no behavioral health support during the event, and even more, although probably not statistically significant, 86% after they went home got no support. So if we take a look at this, what are the kinds of things that we saw? Anxiety, sleeplessness, relationship stress. This looks like having a new baby. So anxiety, sleeplessness, relationship stress. Okay, I mean that's not surprising. That if we take a look at moodiness, and then we take these last two, nightmares, suicidal thoughts. So my next present, wrapped in the golden box because it's the most important one to me, is this present. 0. 0. I don't want anybody having nightmares because they did what we did for the good of people, for animals, and society. I want that to be 0. I don't want anybody having suicidal thoughts for having performed the mission that's essential for our societies, our animals, our people, our economies. And look at how both those numbers spiked after they left. While they're there on the ground with their fellow responders, they could share things together. They could share moments, they could share thoughts and feelings that they couldn't express to someone else. But then you go home to your spouse, or your significant other, or your family, and say, well, what did you do? And we want to tell the good stories, but in here are some very, very hard stories. And these numbers are totally unacceptable. I was in New Zealand giving a talk on disaster preparedness, and I found this Maori proverb. I'll let you read it yourself. You ask me, what is the most important thing? My reply must be, it is people, it is people, it is people. Because we care for animals, that's critical. But we care for animals as part of society, we care for animals as part of our families, and we care for them because that human-animal bond and the impact they have on others, and we have to take care of people. Last year, just about this time, I was in Ireland giving a talk for the European Union, and I always like to find local things, and they had a term, away with the fairies, which I hadn't heard before. Irish term, away with the fairies. And we cannot do the best analogy I can say is being in La La Land. We cannot be in La La Land about this. You're going to hear about a lot of serious things this week. How to work hard, how to do better, how to employ what we do. But all of it has to do with us as responders, as us who are on the ground, of us who deploy others, and we have to ensure that those numbers that we have in behavioral health do not stay this way. If not us, then who? Who else is going to care about our animal health behavior sponsors? If not us, then who? And if not now, when? When are we going to do it? How many suicides will we have to suffer before we say, maybe this is a problem? And so that's my challenge to you. We started off with some fun stuff, ended up with a very serious thing, and this is a serious note. This is us, and we have to take care of ourselves. So I thank you for what you've done in the past. Thank you for what you are doing now, which is extraordinary, and I thank you for what you're going to do in the future, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to you.
Dr. Brogan-Dewey. We have time for a couple questions if there are any. Vanessa will run about with the microphone if anybody's got any questions. Dr. B.
Hi, I'm Kelly Ferris. I'm from the NC State College of Veterinary Medicine. And I know one of the things on the agenda this week is to discuss improving our veterinary education for future veterinary responders. And I know, as a fellow educator and some of those in the room, one of the things that we're really concerned about is resilience in our current veterinary student population. And so I think that discussing these kinds of concerns when we talk about those veterinary response training programs for those students, I think it's going to be really critical, and I wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
So thank you for the comment, and echo, that's important, because as we teach, we go through our disaster training for students, but in other areas, we tend to talk about the mechanics of it and the happy things and whatever, and they need to realize that this is serious business and it can have serious consequences. So I would love to see disaster training put into all veterinary colleges and other type schooling, and this is critical. The other thing I would say in working with OIE is they have a guidelines for international veterinary education, and disasters are not in that, and we're pushing hard to try to add that there. But absolutely appreciate the comment.
My name is Kristen Haas. I'm with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, and thank you for your presentation. It was very enjoyable and meaningful. So my question is related to your experience with the credibility piece with your wife. Not specific to that, however, I wonder, so I've tried to do some research lately on the whole climate change, climate disruption issue, and because I've wondered why, with all the scientific facts out there that are available, people just still don't do what we should be doing as readily as we should. And so one of the things I've come across is the need to engage psychologists and other individuals that are experts in communication and how to reach people with these messages, and that putting things out there like parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere just doesn't register with people. I'm wondering if in your experience with OIE or FAO, if that has been acknowledged, or is that anything that these larger organizations are working on?
That's a great question, and I heard a segment on the hidden brain in NPR that talked about people, and they had a group that they were talking about vaccinations in this case, but they took a group of people that were against vaccination. They came in and brought experts and showed them scientific data, and then measured their understanding and beliefs afterwards, and they got worse. And the thinking is that when you challenge, so when you put facts in front of people and challenge them to it, you have to believe the facts. You're kind of challenging their personal credibility. And so, but if you compliment them first and tell them, oh yeah, anyway, that I think you're exactly right. You know, we need this. We need to be the psychologists, the social scientists, the anthropologists. We need to add them to our program to be good. And I just a quick, if I'm okay,
Oh, you're
quick example. Was working with a risk communication group that was down in Houston where there are a lot of chemical plants, and it just shows you how you can do bad risk communication. Every year they'd have to have a community forum to talk to the community about the risks from the plants. And they sent the scientists in with their white lab coats and pocket protectors and pens up here, and then going through all the jargon and all this could happen. And then finally someone said, well, you know, what are the chances of this actually happening? And so one of the scientists says, oh, we've done a lot of calculations on this, and the chance of this actually happening is 10 to the minus 7. 10 to the minus 7, that's 3. There's a 3 times chance this is going to happen. You know, scientists are not necessarily the best on the communication, and so I think you're exactly right. Maybe Dr. Green's going to tell us how we do this, but people, when you challenge people on a factual basis who are not in the receptive mode, you actually, they get worse. I mean, they get worse. They cling stronger to those beliefs. Excellent.
Dr. Green, over here, Vanessa.
Well, I'm lost.
Your left side.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to thank you as well for your presentation. Yesterday, the Southern Animal and Agriculture Disaster Response Alliance, we had our regional meeting, and one of the topics that we talked about was agriculture mental health. The state of Georgia, just wanted to kind of highlight some of the points that you did. One of my interns, Kelly Raines from Emory Rollins School of Public Health, she's a NPH candidate. Kevin Dennison had shared some of his mental health data from radiological incidents, and she went out and did some research, and so as a result of that, we've come out with a pamphlet in Georgia, as well as a poster on resiliency, just looking at the statistics for farmers and the agricultural community. And so the state of Florida has also done a lot of work in that area. And so I know that moving forward, both Sadra and NASAAEP would like to partner with you on this topic. We kind of dance around it, talking about, you know, critical incident stress debriefings and that type of thing, but the reality with suicide and the statistics. Again, our end result was focusing on the resiliency end, looking at the fact that there's a continuum, you know, related to the mental health spectrum, but the suicide statistics are very real as well. And just pointing people to the resources. SAMHSA, just wanted to give a shout out to FEMA as well. After disasters, they do put people boots on the ground, but I don't think we do enough knowledge outreach related to providing those services. So I just wanted to say kudos to you on that, and look forward to being able to partner on how we can create greater awareness related to that topic. So.
Thank you. And I think later on in the week you have a full hour presentation doing a deep dive into this, and kudos to NASAAEP to putting it on the agenda. And I know you used the word dancing around, you know, kind of, I'm not dancing around. This is dead serious and dead serious for us. And it should be top, it should be on every meeting and every agenda. You know, we need to take care of each other. We also need to take care of those owners. Boots on the ground is good, but what happens when everybody goes home and you can see that 6 months later, 6 years later, 1 month later, when they're at home and don't have boots on the ground support, that's when things are really bad. So thank you for highlighting it and letting us highlight it again. So I'll stop with that. Thank you very much. It's been a great honor to be here, and thank you for what you did.